Greetings, magical mavens. Today's episode of the Alchemy of Affluence podcast is going to be the first of a short series of journal prompts for the spring equinox season. I'm sharing with you some of the actual journal prompts from within my Book of Seasons program in this video today for free because I want to show you firsthand what it actually looks like to take seasonal wisdom from the Wheel of the Year and actually apply it to your personal development journey in real time. All right, let's make some magic. Spring equinox, also known as Ostara or Easter. First day of spring, celebrated around March 21st. The word equinox means equal night, referring to the way there are 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of darkness on both the autumn and spring equinoxes. After the spring equinox, the days will begin to grow longer than the nights, making way for the warmer, brighter days of spring and summer. The spring equinox is one of the checkpoints of the Wheel of the Year, whose themes actually have been translated fairly well into popular culture. The themes of eggs, seedlings, and baby animals are all meant to represent fertility, which is the major motif of this celebration. Depending on where we are in the world, the land and weather may be at varying stages of warmth and rebirth, but this is the time of year when the promise of new life is springing forth. And we too have the opportunity to step forward into the warm season with a renewed sense of potential and promise. Here, I'll share my story about my current relationship to the spring equinox. What has it meant to me thus far? What are my memories, traditions, and connotations of this time of the year? Today was a really emotionally intense day for me, and I've been processing lots of energy, and it's had an effect of kind of physical exhaustion and faintness even. But even amidst all of that, I felt myself perk up when for just a moment or two, the sun came out and birds began to chirp. It was as if just for a moment in that short-lived patch of sunlight, I got a tiny glimpse into spring in the midst of a cold, gloomy winter. This, in essence, is the vibe of the spring equinox for me. I've always found it strange and perhaps even a little annoying that it's now the norm to perpetuate this unrealistic idea that by the spring equinox, it's green everywhere. And there's an abundance of baby chicks, bunnies, flowers, and flimsy sundresses. Perhaps that may be the case in some parts of the world, but considering that the most commonly accepted themes of the spring equinox come from and are celebrated in places where typically that's not the case, I try to avoid feeding into that expectation. Sure, sometimes the birds are just starting to come out and mate, and a few daffodils or snowdrops might just be pushing out their first few stems, but where I live, late March still tends to look and feel an awful lot like winter. I had to learn this the hard way in the early times of my witchy journey. There have been times when I got so into all the stereotypical imagery of Ostara during my studies that I got way ahead of myself and tried to start gardening at the spring equinox, only to find my fragile seedlings to freeze in a blizzard. I would like to say that all that about abundant life and warm weather is really perfectly suited for May's Eve, but honestly, even May 1st is sometimes still too early to trust leaving plants outside without being super careful to watch the temperature and make sure they don't get hit with a surprise frost or even light snow. And in turn, I also avoid using the stereotypical symbols of sunflowers at summer solstice. Unless you started way early with a greenhouse or grow lamps indoors, you're not going to see a sunflower, certainly not in full bloom, by late June. That's August Eve through autumn equinox here. And even the expectation of the autumn equinox being full of cool breezes and orange trees can be unrealistic sometimes. Like in 2018 when it was a sweltering 90-something degrees while I was trying to serve hot, cozy food for my autumn equinox party. It's for these reasons that I'm so interested both in learning alongside whatever the actual experience of the season may be each year as it's happening, and forming flexible traditions based on themes that seem to show up for you personally year after year. Staying open to discover how it's showing up for you as you grow and change. I'm also really curious to learn more from people's experience who have traveled to different climates or cultures at times of the year, or even moved to different types of environments, and how they experience consistency and or shifts in their seasonal themes and traditions. To circle back around to the spring equinox, typically this is always a time of year when I start to open up more in some expansive way, and it often seems to come along with both a renewed sense of hope and a challenging feeling of discomfort while expanding outside of my comfort zone. And it often seems to entail some realization or some resolution, but also some real 3D reality action steps that put me out there in some new way. It involves making like a hermit crab and having to have the courage and resourcefulness and the motivation to get out of my shell and tangibly move myself into a new, more expansive realm of some kind. I feel that this type of energy crosses over with Aries energy, which is that fiery, self-starting energy that births conscious new results into one's life with an unstoppable, instinctive, and primal birthing process. The type of force that I imagine is like the experience of giving birth or being given birth to in the literal biological sense. Perhaps the mother wants to be a mother and wants her baby to be born, but also has no control over the biological timeline, process, and mechanisms of the pregnancy and birth itself. All she can do is flow with the process and use her resources to make herself as comfortable and supported as possible. And on the baby's end, perhaps the soul wants to incarnate, but it doesn't necessarily get to control all the details of its birth either. It's an automatic biological process that we all just have to go through that's raw, intense, and inevitable, and often rather scary and uncomfy. It's that kind of mandatory rebirth or up-level that can present itself in that sort of grow or die dynamic. That's an unavoidable reckoning that gives you no choice but to move forward. I'm definitely feeling this energy very strongly right now. It's been a really intense time lately, and in a way, I feel tired, like I almost have no energy left to tolerate the way things have been going in areas of my life that have felt disempowered, while at the same time, knowing that I'm on the right path. And as long as I just stay dedicated to my desires, values, and intuition, the growth process will happen on its own, and I'll be guided through my initiation with as much grace and ease as I'm willing to allow myself to embody. So, magical mavens, this was my candid response to just the first of 4 spring equinox journal prompts. Get lifetime access to the printable downloads of my original journal prompt page layouts. So I always suggest approaching the seasonal magic with a gentle season-long style. So you actually have the grace period of 2 weeks after the spring equinox to experience its magic before it's time to start shifting over to the energy of the next season, which is May's Eve. So magical mavens, I invite you to check out the link that I've shared with this episode. Go over to writingwitch.com and scroll down to where it says Book of Shadows pages. So if you're the kind of magical maven who loves the idea of combining magical thinking, seasons, elements, along with actual personal development hacks to help you manifest into the next best version of yourself, I invite you to subscribe to this channel because more of this magical inspiration is coming your way in the season ahead. And if you enjoyed this episode, I invite you to also check out this playlist on my YouTube all about how to work with the seasonal energies of the Wheel of the Year in easy, manageable, and tangible ways that actually help you to manifest your ideal next version of yourself. Thank you so much for joining me, and until next time, blessed be.